What if I told you that there are moments and situations where you could be perfect, you could have all the communication skills dialed in, you could be energetically calm, and you still would not have any influence over your partner? Since I often work with one person to change the whole relationship, and I'm constantly rejecting the idea that it takes two, and I'm touting the power of one person alone to radically transform a marriage, it's essential that I am clear about the times when this is not the case. Sometimes people don't want to accept that, and sometimes it's also hard to know the difference. Am I just throwing in the towel because this is uncomfortable, or is this one of those times where it truly won't make a difference? So if you've begged or pleaded or reasoned with your spouse and you keep bringing up the same old issues only to feel like nothing works and they just never hear you, then this is for you. I'm going to share 6 times or situations in which you really don't have the influence that you think you do. What I mean is that this situation has to be addressed before you could ever expect that your work on the relationship and communication and the emotional connection and the repair work is going to matter. So the first one that I want to share is that if your spouse is leaning out, okay, if your spouse is saying they're done, they're past the point of no return, they don't want to be with you, and I'm talking to you on the phone, but I'm not talking to that person. So they're gone. They don't want to join the conversation. But I'm talking to a person who is saying, here's what's going on for them. They're avoidant. They don't know how to communicate. They are overreacting. They don't have good boundaries with their family, like whatever it is. There's a laundry list of things that you can see that they're doing wrong, and you want to turn around the relationship, but they're leaning out, right? You have no leverage. You have no, there's literally nothing we can do with that, because all you have is what they're doing wrong and what they need to change, but they have no interest in changing it. And so you don't have any inroads, right? You'd have an inroad if they really wanted to be with you and there was a part of them that was open to the repair work that you're doing, or a part of them was open to new experiences. Maybe they're ambivalent, and there's areas that you have that you can acknowledge to say, I'm going to work on my side of the street. But if what you're trying to do is convince them to come back in and then convince them to make the changes that they need to make for the relationship to be good, you're in a losing proposition here, right? There's no incentive for them. Hey, here's why you should come back to the relationship, and here's the things that you should do to make this relationship good. You're not offering anything, right? So in order to have leverage, you have to have something that they want. You have to be able to focus on something on your side of the street that you can give them that they've been wanting. Maybe it's an unmet need that they haven't had met, and they're hopeless that it will ever be met. Well, in that case, if you start meeting that need now, well, now you have leverage. Now you have the possibility that you could magnetize them back into the relationship because there's something that they were missing that now you're giving. But if they're saying there's nothing that they want from you, and or there's nothing that you feel that you can change because you're already doing everything right and they don't want to be with you, then in those scenarios, I would say just let it go, walk away. You have to pull back. You won't get anywhere with that type of situation. And just keep in mind that you're not offering them anything that would be different than what made them want to leave in the first place. Right? It doesn't really make sense. It's not logical. And from a locus of control standpoint, that's not an area where you have any control. And I know that's really hard to hear. Sometimes people want their couples coach or their marriage coach to sort of reach their partner and be like, can you please tell them? Because they'll listen to you. And so some people want the coach to become an arm for what they're advocating for. And the truth is that first of all, that doesn't work as well as you think it will. But even if we could reach them on your behalf, you're not really offering anything. You're just trying to convince them to stay with what you're already bringing, and you're not offering anything different. So if they feel that they have enough reason to leave and you're not offering anything different, just remember that. And if your spouse is leaning out and you want to break out of the cycle and you want to figure out, am I in that situation? Ask yourself, am I offering them something different? Am I showing up with a promise to disrupt the old pattern, the old narrative? Am I showing up in a way that's acknowledging what their stated reasons are for leaving? Because if you can't acknowledge why they feel they need to leave, then they don't think it can ever be different, right? If you just want me to come back and then get over what I think and feel so that we can have a good relationship, what's in it for me, right? So you really have to think about that. If you want to have leverage, you need to know what's in it for them. Now, the second situation where you don't have any leverage is if your spouse is an addict, if they have an untreated acute addiction. This could include a porn addiction. This could include a gambling addiction. This could include substances, opiates. It could include screen addiction, where people just, they're misery stabilizers that have gone to such a high degree where they can't stop scrolling. They just cannot be present because they have an addict brain or a mind that is constantly seeking like dopamine hits and stimulation at the expense of authentic, real connection. Unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about that except to share how it impacts us, to hold boundaries. And like a boundary might be if you're living with somebody who is a severe alcoholic and you're having to pick up the pieces, or the impact is really, affecting your family life or your children, then a boundary would be, we can't live under the same roof until you get help. I love you unconditionally, but I'm not going to be under the same roof unconditionally. And it's okay to have boundaries. And if they really want to still be with you, sometimes a boundary is what they must have. Because if you're dealing with an addict mind, they're going to need to be in acute discomfort before they're going to want to get the help. That's the whole reason why the concept of rock bottom was developed. In an addicted system, every cell in their body is wanting that hit. And if they had the ability to be like, it's probably a good idea for my relationship to stop, so I'm going to stop. Well, if you could do that from a whole-brained, conscious, intentional place, well, then you're not an addict. But if you're an addict, it's probably going to take rock bottom. It's probably going to take hard boundaries. It's probably going to take facing losing something that's really important to you before you're going to make that change. So if your spouse is an addict and I'm talking to you on the phone and you're saying, how can I get through to my spouse? How can I turn around this marriage? How can I make a healthy relationship with my addicted spouse who won't get help? And my answer is, you've got a precondition, and that has to be dealt with. Because if they're addicted and that's where they're getting their dopamine, they're going to prioritize that over the relationship or the connection. It doesn't mean they don't love you. It just means that their addiction is stronger. And so the best thing that you can do is to know where your influence ends, get into some, 12-step like codependency support groups, anything that is helping you to know what your boundaries are, where like what is on your side of the street and what is not on your side of the street. That sounds simpler than it is. It's actually not that easy necessarily to know what that is. What power do I have if I can't get through to them? Then where's my power? Where's my boundary? That's what you have to figure out. And sometimes that's a process. And sometimes that requires individual work first or group work in the appropriate communities. And then once your spouse is ready and they are in recovery and they're going to meetings or they've been treated, well, then now we can heal. Now we can step back into the relationship. It doesn't even mean you have to divorce or split. Maybe your boundary is not that you don't live under the same roof. Maybe your boundary is just that you pull back from any expectations and you live parallel lives until they're willing to get help. You have to find out what that is. Boundaries could be internal. It could be around what you engage in, what you participate in, what you do or don't do with your communication or your availability or the excuses that you make to extended family, whatever the case may be. And I know that's hard because if you have a lot of compassion for your spouse and you know that there's so much potential and you just can't reach them, it's extremely painful. It's extremely painful to feel that powerless, but it would be unethical for me to say, yes, I can help you turn this around, just you, even if they're not participating when we're dealing with an untreated acute addiction, which is a precondition. The third thing is that if your spouse is a full-blown narcissist, a lot of people have narcissistic traits. Your spouse might have some narcissistic traits. That doesn't mean that that's a precondition. What you really want to look for is, do they have the amount of traits that would constitute a diagnosis, a proper diagnosis of narcissistic personality disorder? You can look that up. It's super easy. It's like, I think you need 5 or 7 of the criteria of the traits that are listed. But what I really notice when I'm talking to somebody when I think they have a precondition is that their spouse never takes accountability. They're always table turning and deflecting. It's never their fault. They can't take feedback. They're hypersensitive to criticism. They have sort of grandiose and delusional ideas of their importance, and they care more about how they are reflected in your eyes or everyone else's eyes than they are about actually having an authentic, real communication. That's what I mean when I say, okay, you're dealing with a narcissist. This is somebody that literally will throw you under the bus to protect their own reputation in front of anybody. And that's not somebody that has your back. That's not somebody that has the ego strength to be able to take accountability and make some changes or have empathy. A chronic and profound lack of empathy is also a very big indicator of narcissistic personality disorder. So you want to rule that out. Look into that. Melanie Tanya Evans is a fantastic resource for people that are in narcissistic relationships. I recommend her. You can look her up as well. The fourth thing is, if your spouse is abusive. Now, I want to make a distinction here between abusive behaviors and an abusive cycle, an abusive personality. You can be in a relationship with somebody who occasionally says things that you could say, you know what, that's verbally abusive. But it's not the pattern. It's not the norm. It happens in times of acute stress. It happens when there's a lot of dysregulation. And then later there's an accountability and a commitment to work on that. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a cycle of power and control, which is like your partner has to have control. They have to have control financially. They have to have control of their access to you. They have to have control of other people's access to you. They're monitoring you. They're monitoring your whereabouts. They're tracking you. They're like hoarding the money. They're taking your paycheck and only doling it out, and you have to ask for everything. It's like financial abuse. It's scary moods and tempers. It's obviously it's physically abuse, but also just a pattern of, there's a cycle of violence that's predictable. That's what the cycle of violence is. It's basically like you have your honeymoon phase. They might really love bomb you. Then there's a buildup where you're kind of walking on eggshells, where you start to feel like you got to be careful what you say. There's a buildup, and then that results in an explosion. And then that can be an outburst. That can be damaging property. That can be just screaming at you and saying really horrible things. And then after that, there's acute remorse, there's apologies, and they might be very sincere. They are truly remorseful. They truly are sorry. Then there's a honeymoon phase, and so on. And it repeats. And if this is a repeating cycle, you're in a cycle of violence, and it only gets worse. Like, unless they get help, it will only get worse. This is just a fact, especially if your spouse has ever made you feel scared for your safety, if they've ever shoved you, locked you in a room, taken your phone from you, taken your car keys so you can't leave. These things will escalate unless they will take accountability. Promising to make changes, promising to go to couples counseling will not do it. For you to know that that precondition is being addressed, they would have to be willing to do individual therapy. It's very tempting. A lot of times the abusive partner will say, you're right, I need help. Let's go to couples counseling together. It is not clinically indicated to go to couples counseling with someone who's abusive. First of all, you're not going to be totally honest in therapy. And it's not a dynamic issue. If it was a dynamic issue, then you could change it on your own from the inside out. But because it lives in them and it's not part of the dynamic, this is something that lives in them. And until they fully can take accountability for that in them, it won't change, because abuse is an externalized locus of control. When you get to the point where you're like, somebody's made me so mad that I'm hitting them or losing my shit, like I'm just going to lose it on them, you have an external locus of control. You've given them power over your behavior. Think about it. Some people, you could be absolutely the worst and they would never lay a hand on you. They would never do anything. They would never even say anything hurtful to you, even if you're acting in a way that you would think could justify that, right? No, you can't make anybody be abusive. So until they're willing to recognize that it's in them and they will fix it with or without you, then their commitment isn't real. Their commitment is just to get you back. So that's really important. And once they have you back, complacency will always win. And that isn't even because they're maliciously trying to manipulate you and continue to be abusive necessarily. But what it means is that they are minimizing the power of their default psychology, those subconscious programs that are 10 million times more powerful than their conscious goal to not be abusive or to be angry or to be controlling. If you are in an abusive cycle and you're scared of your partner or they've hit you before and maybe they haven't hit you recently, but you know that it's possible and it informs your behavior around them, it makes you want to hide or freeze or fawn in order to stay safe, you're in an abusive relationship. And I would not recommend taking an inside out approach. I would take the approach of extricating yourself, having clear boundaries, making it very clear what you're going to participate in and not participate in, and hold firm by holding those boundaries, because an abusive person will not respect your boundaries. Like, they're not going to make it easy for you. So you would have to be really strong. That would be the inside out approach for that situation. It would not be to think, if I can get better at communicating, then they will change. I can get their behavior to change with my changes. Normally that's the case, but not when you're dealing with these situations of preconditions. And then the fifth thing is, if they have a mental health condition, an acute untreated mental health condition. I'm not talking about your garden variety anxiety or depression, although deep and chronic and heavy depression definitely would need to be resolved before you could ever have a truly healthy relationship, but it's not a deal breaker, right? But let's say you're dealing with somebody who has bipolar 1 disorder, or they have borderline personality disorder. They have severe and debilitating depression where the loss of functioning is so severe that they aren't able to get out of bed in the morning. They're not able to take care of themselves. That would fall under the category of a precondition. or psychosis, like if they're dealing with hallucinations or fixed delusions, if they feel that they're being persecuted, if they feel like you or your family members are stealing their things and you know that that's not true, that's a fixed delusion. Something like that is not something, they're not grounded in reality. You're not able to start at the same point. If you don't share a basic sense of reality, you're not going to be able to grow your relationship or have an authentic, healthy connection. So if they are off their meds and they are behaving in below the line ways, I mean, people that have bipolar 1 will become hypersexual and cheat on their spouse, or they'll spend a ton of money and like there will be financial infidelity, or they'll be so manic that they can't function and it's impacting the kids and it's creating chaos. Then it would be about boundaries. Like until you have healed that, until this is fixed, then we can't be in a healthy relationship. And the boundary for you would be, how do I make sure that I no longer participate in a dynamic that is not healthy for me or the future generations? It's very difficult, but it's not as difficult as trying to reach somebody that you can't reach. So keep that in mind. It's actually not as hard as what you're trying to do in reaching your spouse with a precondition. And then the final situation where you really have no leverage, where you don't have any influence, is if your spouse is having their attachment needs met in a relationship outside of your marriage. This could be a work wife or a work husband, or it could be an emotional affair. It could be a full-blown physical affair. Anything where their attachment needs, their closeness, they have somebody that is meeting their needs. You don't have any leverage if their needs for connection are already being met, right? If your partner or your spouse has some really primary attachment or connection with somebody at work or a friend, but you know that that friend knows more than you know about your spouse, they're more in the know than you are, you're on the outs because they're talking about you to them, and it's a secret, that's a situation where the best thing you can do is to hold a very firm boundary, which would mean I'm not going to participate in a relationship where I'm not primary. Like if you're my primary person, I'm not going to make you primary if I'm not your primary, right? So what does that look like? Well, that could look different for everybody. For some people, that would mean moving out. For some people, that would mean we're going to be separated under the same roof. It might mean like I'm not sharing myself with you and you don't have access to me. Like it could mean many different things, but the most important thing is to keep in mind that a strong boundary, which is something that you do or don't do, it's not something you get them to honor. It's something you do. The stronger your boundary, the better catalyst for change you can be. If they are not past the point of no return, and if there is a chance that you can bring back the relationship, a boundary will not ruin that. Some people are like, well, I don't want to hold a boundary because then it will be over. Right? Well, if it's over from a boundary, then it's already over. And so then you're just coming into acceptance of what's already true. And this is tough. This is tough because I talk to a lot of people that are like, I'm willing to do the work. I can do this on my own. And it's like, well, yeah, you could do personal development work, but it would be unethical for me to give you false hope that your personal work will be the thing that turns your spouse around if they're dealing with a precondition. I think that's the hardest thing for people to hear if they don't want to let go of a relationship with someone who's having an affair, has an addiction that they won't get help for. They are choosing something over the health of your relationship because their needs are being met or because there's some significant psychological barrier that is in the way, that lives in them, that is not between you. If it was between you and you changed your moves of the dance, then they would have to change their moves to stay connected. But in these situations, they're not going to change their moves because the connection is already not the priority. Something else is more important in all of these situations. I wish I could tell you that you could change it. I wish I could tell you it doesn't take two, it only takes one. You can go first and you can catalyze everything. In those situations, you really can't. If I could help you do it, I would. In this situation, the hard reality is that you have to make a hard decision for yourself. Am I going to hold a boundary? Am I going to walk away? Am I going to settle? Your choice. Like, I'm not here to judge any choice you make, but just be clear within your own self what's possible and what's not possible. There's a little bit of an adjustment to that acceptance, but I hope that that's helpful. That's it for today. If you like my content, please take a second and either like this video or subscribe to my channel or both. That will help us reach the people that really need to hear this stuff.